Good evening. Welcome to Wordpath, a show about the importance of Oklahoma Indian languages and the people who are preserving and teaching them. My guest tonight is Ronald Red Elk, who's Comanche. He's the assistant principal of Anadarko High School, and he's president of the Comanche Language and Cultural Preservation Committee. Welcome, Ron. How do you greet someone in Comanche?
Well, the Comanches would say, if just greeting you, Marelwe.
Marelwe.
The greeting for a group is Marelwe. I greeted groups several times in my efforts to preserve the Comanche language, and that's normally the way I would start off with.
When you're talking to a whole audience.
Talking to a group of people.
Okay. Where is Comanche spoken? Could you show us on the map, just roughly for people who may not know where most of the Comanches live?
It's located in the southwest part of the state in Comanche County. Most of the Comanche speakers live in and around Lawton, the communities of Cache, Indiahoma, Walters.
Can you point one more time the general area where that is?
Okay, right here is Lawton, and this area that I'm tracing with my finger is Comanche County.
Right. Good. And you yourself live in Anadarko, right?
Correct. Anadarko is about 45 miles north of Lawton.
Fine. Just so that everyone can hear a little Comanche early in the show, I think you brought your speech about the adoption of the Comanche alphabet that you made once to the Comanche Business Committee. Would you like to start us off by reading that so we can hear what Comanche sounds like?
Marelweka, na ha heights na, kabuni, initama, dama namarekwap, iniku, nabora, sunika, dana namarekwap, makwitso aitui. Ha, sinikuma, zaatama, urako. In translation, I greet the CBC as my friends, and I tell them, look at it this way, our Comanche language, here in writing, this is the way we will save the Comanche language. This is the way it is. It is very good.
Very good. And so this was basically your pitch on behalf of the Language Committee to get an official alphabet adopted by the tribe, right?
Yes, that
your opening salvo.
That was our first appearance as a group of Comanches petitioning the CBC, which is the Comanche Business Committee, for recognition of a official spelling system or alphabet. Our Comanche Language and Cultural Preservation Committee was formed in August of '93, and we wanted to try to gather as many speakers as we could through the months of June, July, and August, and introduce them to this system. This system is the system that you used in your classes at the University of Oklahoma. After this exposure to this system, the speakers there felt like that this system would work, and that gave us the initiative to try to have an official form, one written form of Comanche.
So your speech was quite successful, I would say.
The Comanche Business Committee voted overwhelmingly to accept the system. I don't know if it was the speech that
I'm
did
sure
it, but Junior Waryakwi and I made the speech. I needed somebody to help me or nudge me along. Giving a speech, even as short as that was, to a non-speaker and speaking to a group of Comanches is a very, very difficult thing to do.
Yeah. Ron, we've already talked about one of your early successful projects on the Language Committee, but let's back up for a minute and talk about your personal history with the Comanche language. You said that you don't consider yourself a native speaker of Comanche, correct?
That's correct.
How did you get to the point of being involved with the Language Committee and undertaking these projects? How has all of this evolved in your life?
Well, I've always wanted to learn to speak the Comanche language. When I was growing up, and my family, my mother primarily, my dad passed away when I was quite young, but my mother was a fluent Comanche speaker. But by the time I got to the age where I should have learned the language, English became the first language of the home. And I, at various times through the growing up process, I would always quiz her about some words, and sometimes she would tell me, and sometimes she wouldn't. And at the times that she wouldn't, she would tell me that I needed to learn English and be able to function in English well enough to compete with the world at large. And I think she had bought into the educational system that she was brought up in that the Comanche language was not essential. It was something that needed to be cast off. And a lot of Comanches are under that impression, or somewhat under that impression, and that's part of the problem of language preservation within our tribe. In '92, I read an article in the Lawton paper of Comanche classes starting at the University of Oklahoma. And since I've been to school practically all my life, I thought, well, that'd be a good opportunity to pick up on some Comanche words. I came in and visited the class and found it to my liking, and spent several semesters going to those classes. And through that process, I come to the realization that we're going to lose the language, that classes such as that and community classes of adults was not learning the language quick enough. Our speakers are elderly, and we're losing them. The time that by the time I learned to speak Comanche, I wouldn't have anybody to speak to. And from that, I got the interest of getting involved as a person and as a organization through this Comanche Language and Culture Preservation Committee. It's just not me. There's a group of Comanches that have had this interest and this desire to do something about it. And from that, the committee was formed.
How many people are involved in the Language Committee? About?
The count varies. We have up to 30 people at a meeting, and probably the active group is between 10 and 15. They're the ones that do most of the work. We have some speakers that are pretty active, some that are not so active, primarily due to their age.
And that's a very serious problem in language preservation with a language like Comanche. So many of the really expert people in the language are getting on in years, and their health may not be good, and they may not get out that much anymore. So
and that really creates a problem for us in trying to establish programs and get them to meetings or get them to sites where we're having programs.
Right. People would probably like to hear about some of the other projects that the committee has undertaken. One of my favorites was the Language Immersion Weekend, and I'm wearing the buttons that we distributed during that weekend that say, "Ket tarai vareklar," don't talk English. Can you explain why we had this button and what that was all about?
This was one of the early projects that we started off with, and we had a Saturday and a Sunday in May, and advertised it, and we had a pretty good group show up there, and it was going to be total Comanche, no English spoken whatsoever. We had about eight or nine speakers that came in, and they spoke on different areas of Comanche life and the Comanche language. And we started off, I think, about 10 o'clock. From 9 to 10, we had registration on that Saturday, and we went for about 45 minutes, and the frustration level of the adults just were too hard to bear, and the people wanted to know what the Comanches were saying about whatever the topic may be. It may have been a native man dress, or numbers, or kin terms, whatever. We had a variety of subjects, and then the speakers also wanted them to know, and finally we just called it quits on total immersed, and had it Comanche language, and then the English explanation of what they were talking about. But we found out that it was very difficult to operate in that setting.
Yeah.
But I think one of the problems is, our committee was just formulating, and we were just starting off, and that led to the breakdown in being totally immersed. It was a new experience for even the speakers. They're so used to English that we're all creatures of habit, and they just naturally go back into speaking English. We went Sunday with a hymn singing service, and had some good participation there. Yeah. All the people that came were really enthused with what we were doing, and hoping that we would try it again.
Yeah.
And
I think that was, you're kind of apologizing for it because didn't end up being total immersion. You and I seem to believe in total immersion more than an awful lot of people that show up to be the students. It takes a kind of courage, I think, to really set your English aside when you don't know much Comanche yet. Some of the students were better at it than others, but I do think it was very successful in that, well, the enthusiasm that you just mentioned. People were just so excited. Probably a number of the people that were there were hearing more Comanche at one time in one place than they had in quite a while. And one of the things that really thrilled me was Forrest Casnavoid, who was going around being the sort of the camp crier for the weekend, and he would come up every so often and say, I don't know what in Comanche, I only understood about half of it at most, but it was just thrilling to know that this is a tradition that's gone on for many, many generations, someone going around announcing what's going to happen next, and addressing all of the Comanches as a group, as if they were in a camp, and I think a lot of people found that really thrilling.
Yeah, I think,
So
everybody enjoyed it, and want language preservation to carry on.
Yeah.
It was
do you think there'll
satisfying to me.
Do you think there'll be another immersion weekend at some point?
I'm sure there will be. The committee has so many ideas and projects, and we're a completely volunteer group. We meet once a month, the first Tuesday of the month, and there's just so much we can do within that time frame. But we're really excited about our preschool immersion program that's coming about.
Tell us about that. Maybe start with the little pilot program that was held last June, if you could. We had a previous show with Richard Cotapony where we showed some footage of one of the preschool classrooms in June and the graduation ceremony. What's the relationship between that June program and the upcoming program?
Well, we, as a volunteer group, we found it difficult to have programs without funding, and the funding was a big issue. We needed to find private, federal, tribal. We were trying at all sources of funding, and the preschool that we had in the month of June in '95 was funding through tribal monies. And that really encouraged us as a committee when we went before the General Council and asked for a budget. Now the Comanche Business Committee has always been encouraging and helpful and were behind us in our efforts until we came to asking for money, and then they were a little bit apprehensive about monies and how much and what we were going to do with it. And if you don't know the makeup of the tribal government, every April there's a general council that's held, and they approve a budget to go for a vote before the Comanche people, and the Comanche people will vote for that budget or against it. And we went to that general council and asked them for $25,000, and the CBC knew that we were going to ask for a budget, but their jaws dropped when I mentioned $25,000. They really did. They thought that was a little bit ambitious. We didn't know. We didn't know whether the Comanche people would stand up and say yes, put that on the budget items for a vote, or turn it down there at the General Council. And we had enough support there. They put it on the ballot, and when the vote came in, they approved us $25,000 for language preservation programs, and that money was part of what we used for our preschool. We had 5 sites throughout Comanche country where we had preschool language immersion, and we had approximately 75 kids that went through that. We had 3 speakers at each site and 2 aides to work with that young kids, because those speakers were again elderly, and we took that in consideration. Each site was unique, had its strong points and weak points, but overall it was a very successful program in that we gained some more support from the Comanche people. Those parents and grandparents and great-grandparents had seen how those youngsters responded to this Comanche, and how quickly they had just absorbed the language. A lot of times they didn't know what they were saying, but they could just spit those words right back to the speakers without any difficulty at all. One of the things that struck me the most was the numbers. When we were learning numbers in our college classes as adults, when we got
a couple of them are real
when we got to 7 and 8, we just couldn't pronounce them, and those kids just spit those words out with no difficulty at all.
I remember how excited people were at the graduation ceremony, and it almost surprised me how good a reception there was for the children, because like you say, a lot of what they did wasn't very sophisticated, and yet when you think about it, no one had seen Comanche children of that age speaking that much Comanche for, what, 50 years probably. It really was quite a historic occasion.
Yeah, it was. That's part of our problem. The elders are not speaking to the kids. There's no intergenerational transmission of the language, and that's part of the problem we're going to have to resolve, is to connect those two groups up, and the upcoming program is going to hopefully do that.
I think that's the beauty of the preschool concept. You take the elders who are very expert in the language and you put them with the very youngest tribe members who are best equipped to learn quickly and easily. They have a much easier time than we adults do.
And these elders are the brain trust of our culture. They're the ones that really have the Comanche culture intact. People like me, we were raised in the white man's society, and we're almost totally acculturated, and we need to get back to some of the values of Comanche culture and start rebuilding our Comanche culture and rebuilding our self-esteem as a tribal group. And I feel like that's a very important part of language preservation, and the reasons to try to not only preserve it to a point where we've got it down in writing or on tape, but where we're speaking to each other.
Yeah.
And
Where it's really a living language.
Using it every day, yes.
Yeah. I always try to ask my guests about any connections between language and culture, and I think this is the first time anybody in so many words has mentioned self-esteem as a cultural value that the language can enhance. I think it's really important.
Yeah.
I've certainly seen it happen just in our Comanche classes at OU in the past. I've seen young people come in to take the class and they just kind of don't expect it to be very much. I think maybe they may have the impression there isn't that much to the Comanche language, or either meaning that it would be easy for them to learn or that there just isn't much to learn. And then they start seeing that it's a real language and it has real grammar and you really have to study and you have to memorize your dialogues and practice your vocabulary and all this. And at first it sort of puts people aback a little bit, some people, because they're surprised. And then after a while you can just see their self-esteem and their pride growing as they realize that this is a real language like any other language is a real language. And languages are hard to learn, but they're worth the effort, especially when it's part of your cultural tradition, I think.
Yeah,
it's a good thing to see.
Right now we're debating on identity. The tribe is trying to figure out who is a member of the Comanche tribe. And back, like when my folks were growing up, you were identified as a Comanche by the way you dressed, the way you spoke, your actions, and your beliefs.
Mm-hmm.
And nowadays, just about all of those are gone, and the language can be one that can really identify who a Comanche is. To me, that's a very important part of bringing Comanche back as a living language.
Very good. Just to touch for a moment on your other role that I mentioned when I introduced you as a assistant principal, can you tell us a little bit about possible connections between educators as a profession and revival or preservation of Indian languages in Oklahoma? I know there was a lot of talk about House Bill 1017 when it came in, thinking that it would promote the study of Indian languages. Has this proved true, and what is the situation?
I think that it has helped in some situations, but the push needs to be from the tribal groups to become more involved with the public school systems and start building interest in their local school boards so that they can develop some language programs. I'm an assistant principal at Anadarko High School, and we have, in that community, we have many tribes going to school in our schools. And by the time they get to high school, it's about 40–45% Native American. We have a native language class, a Kiowa language class, and we've had it. This is the third year that we have this program, and it was started by a group of employees that were under the Title IX and Johnson O'Malley parent committee. They went out and surveyed the community and found out that there was interest in a language class, and Kiowa tribe is the largest tribe in that area, and they by far had the most numbers, so that's why the Kiowas have a language class in our high school today.
Well, we're running down to just the last few minutes. What have we not covered that you think is important that should be mentioned here. We actually, maybe you could say a few more words about the upcoming preschool program, because I know that's just starting, and that's going to be a 3-year program, right?
Yes, that was funded through the A&A grant, Administration for Native Americans.
And we're talking some big money on this project, right?
We were one of 3 tribes that got a 3-year program, so we feel real good about that. I know the first year, and this is the 2nd year of its existence, we weren't so successful. But the grant calls for 20 students, 3 to 5, to be linked up with 4 native speakers in a total immersed program. It's going to be housed at the Coahoma building in Cache, Oklahoma. Cache was selected because of the number of speakers in that area, plus a high concentration of Comanche people there. And it's going to be totally immersed. It's going to be operated on a 9-month basis for 3 years. It's going to run 4 hours a day, and they're going to hopefully show the Comanche people what these kids can learn. And then from this pilot project, we can expand it to other communities in Comanche country. And this being a federally funded project, other groups of Native people can use what we've developed in the way of this preschool program.
I hope so. And I know we all hope that with that level of Comanche input for that length of time, that at the end of those 3 years, you'll have 20 new native speakers. And that's a pretty wonderful result if it happens. We'll certainly hope for the best.
We will finally start replacing the speakers that we lose.
Right.
And that's something that we have not been able to do to date. And hopefully that we will not stop with that 3 years. We will continue to develop possibly a kindergarten group, and so that they will be exposed to this language over a longer period of time, and be as fluent as the speakers that teach those kids. And we want the whole family to be involved. This is not just a 4-hour. We're going to require that the families make a commitment to use it in the home.
Yeah, I think that's wonderful. I'm afraid we're about out of time here, Ron, but I want to thank you very much for being my guest. I think you're in a unique position of leadership both on the Language Committee and in your community to have perspectives on these questions, and I wish the committee the best of luck with the preschool and with its other projects.
Well, thank you for having me.
Certainly. We'll see you next week on the Wordpath.
Na hene yo hene, na hene yo hene, ana magwana kita, wa pene manaone kita. Na hene yo hene, na hene yo hene, ana magwana kita, wa pene manaone kita. Na hene yo hene, na hene yo hene, ana magwana kita, wa pene manaone kita. Na hene yo hene, na hene yo hene, ana magwana kita, wa pene manaone kita. Na hene yo hene, na hene yo hene, ana magwana kita, wa pene manaone kita. Na hene